Glad to see you tonight. Appreciate you being here. I think when you do vocal music well, you never have to apologize for it. And Tammy, I love sitting close to you and hearing you sing. Beautiful. And then hearing the children sing. So I was just surrounded by people who love to sing and do it well. And I thought it was just beautiful. Thank you to all and to Chris for leading us in those songs. We had our first Sunday of the month meeting for our grief discussion group. We had a good number. Want you to know that those are open to anyone, and that's always on the first Sunday of the month at 4:30. And you're welcome to come and share with us as we talk about what it means to grieve. Today we talked about things that people say to us that hurt us and things that people say to us that help us. And if you've ever gone through the grief process, I expect you have, you've heard all of those things. The ones where you appreciate it from the people and the others where you say, I wish you hadn't said that, it didn't help a bit. So you just join us next time, this first Sunday of next month. We're going to talk about holidays because it is hard to go through grief on holidays because they are such family-oriented days. And it's just tough to go through holidays when you're grieving. And you can join us and we'll talk about that the first Sunday of next month. Next Sunday morning, you're going to have a treat. My friend Sam Bartrug, who's been here in a couple of meetings, is a great preacher, is going to be here to speak. Now, I think that somebody got the idea this morning maybe that I'm going to be gone. That's the reason he's speaking. Well, actually, I'm going to be here. And after he speaks, we're all going to be gone. Sierra and I and he and Marty. We've been friends for years and years and years. And same time next year, that's how we do this. It's about his anniversary, about our anniversary. And we go away for a week. And so we're going to leave next Sunday after the morning services and be gone for a week to a cabin in the woods where we're not going to have any phone reception. Hallelujah. I just feel like I ought to shout a little bit on that one. No reception. And we're going to spend a week there, and then we'll be back at the end of the week and be here for the following Sunday. So please keep us in mind as we do that. Tonight, we want to continue our series of lessons on the 10 words. That's what the Hebrews would have called the 10 Commandments. You know, when we say word, that doesn't signify always a single word. It's like when you say to somebody, maybe you say to a child, can I have a word with you? Well, you never leave that at just one word, I'm guessing. I'm guessing that there comes a variety of words, a number of words that follow. So the Hebrews would have called these 10 sayings the 10 words. And we're to number 3 in our study of these commandments, the 10 commandments. It's found in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 7. It's familiar. It reads as follows. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. If you know one of the 10 commandments, you probably know this one. How often do you hear somebody say, now you're not supposed to take the Lord's name in vain? That is the 3rd commandment. I'm labeling this respect God. If you want to know what I think this commandment is about, it is about respecting God. Let's do a little bit of introduction here as we lead up to what we want to say in the application for this. The third commandment continues to speak of man's relationship to God. The first four of the Ten Commandments deal with the man-God relationship. The last six of them deal with the man-to-man relationship. That's in keeping with what Jesus said in Matthew 22 when asked the greatest commandment. You remember what the first one was? Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, strength, and mind. This is the first and great commandment. And then he said, the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang the law and the prophets. So even Jesus said the first thing we need to take care of and make sure we have straight is our relationship with God. And then based on that, the second thing we need to take care of is our relationship with one another. He says here specifically, don't take the name of God in vain. I believe the application of this is far more reaching. And here's what I mean by that. Respecting God is more than just not taking his name in vain. It's further reaching than that. It involves more than that. And I think you'll see some of that as we kind of unpack the lesson for tonight. Now, the Jews were very, very careful not to violate this commandment. It was one that they considered to be one of the greatest of all the commandments. When they got together and argued about which is the greatest commandment in the law, which they tended to do, there were a certain number of rabbis who believed that this was number one on the list. Some others argued that it was remembering the Sabbath. And then there were people who argued about all kinds of other commandments. But this was one of the major commandments that they believed was very, very vital. And they took real care not to violate this. Do you know that Orthodox Jews today still do that? I was reading recently an article written by an Orthodox Jewish rabbi. And as I read through it, when it came to the word God, it said capital G dash D. Because in their mind, that's making sure you don't respect the name of God. You don't even write it down. You don't even say capital G-O-D. You put a dash in there as if people can't figure out what that dash means. But in their mind, somehow, that's a way of respecting the name of God. If they wrote the name of God as the rabbi or as the scribes were copying the scriptures, they would literally get up and wash themselves. Now, can you imagine how many times, if you're reading through, for instance, the first 5 books, the Torah, the books of law, how many times you find the word God in there? And that means that every time before they would write it, they would get up and wash themselves. And they would make sure that the tip of their pen was prepared for a new word, that it was clean. And if they made a mistake, they would not erase it, because that was not showing the proper respect for the name of God. Now, I don't want us to go that far, but I believe we could do a little better than we do in respecting the name of God. I believe there's a laxity these days about the name of God and respecting it, which I'll illustrate in a little while. Why is this important? Have you ever heard somebody say, there's nothing in a name after all? Do you know we say that and we don't believe that for anything? Let somebody call you by the wrong name. What are you most likely to do? Correct them, right? If they mispronounce your name, maybe you have one of those names that's hard to pronounce. We just got a family, the Devereaux, and if you look at how that's spelled, it's a French kind of a word with ending in an X, and it's like Devereaux. How do you get that out of that? we would be told, no, that's Devereaux. There is something in a name. A name stands for the person. My name is Thomas Clyde Miller. My mother and dad decided on that when I was born back in March of 1944. They argued over what to name me. One of them wanted to name me Hunter Clyde Miller Jr., and the other wanted to name me Thomas Hunter Miller, which I think is very distinguished. I wish they had settled on that one. But they didn't use either one of those. They compromised, and it's Thomas Clyde. And so when my son was born, my mother said, Tommy, Hunter Clyde and Thomas Clyde, don't you want to keep Clyde in this? And I said, Mother, I scarcely know the boy. I'm not going to do that to him. She did not appreciate my humor at all. That did not make her happy. And so his mother named him Jeffrey Lorne. She liked Lorne Green. Does that tell you maybe what kind of program she watched way back then? And so his name is Jeffrey Lorne. But there's something in a name. It stands for the person. It reveals something about character. And so if we're going to disrespect a name, it means that we don't respect the person whose name that is. Names stand for something. In Genesis 17:5, we have this fella whose name up to this point in Genesis has been Abram. Abram means exalted father. And God said, from this day forth, you'll not be Abram anymore. You will be Abraham. And Abraham means father of a great multitude. Well, you say, that's kind of splitting hairs, isn't it? No, God didn't feel that way. He wanted to make sure that this man who was an exalted father would become the father of a multitude, a father of a great nation. And as a by the way, he's a spiritual father. We are spiritual descendants of Father Abraham. And so there's something in a name. In Matthew 1:21, when the angel appears, and it's the birth of Jesus, the angel's very clear, and his name shall be called Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. There was no doubt about that. There was no discussion. Mary and Joseph never had to say, what are we going to call him? How about Joseph Jr.? And no, that was not going to be his name. His name will be Jesus. That was a very specific name that was to be used. As a matter of fact, do you know that the word Jesus in the New Testament is equivalent of the word Joshua in the Old Testament? It's the same word. One is in Hebrew and one is in Greek. And you know what it means? Deliverer. Does it fit? Who was the deliverer of God's people in the Old Testament? Joshua led them into the promised land. Who's our deliverer in the New Testament? Jesus. And so there's something in a name. In Acts chapter 4 and verse 12, it would say, neither is there salvation in any other name, for there's none other name given under heaven among men whereby we must be saved. Is there something in a name? Absolutely there's something in a name. And if that's true in those cases that we used, it's true in regard to God. To use the name of God for the tetragrammaton, YHWH, we pronounce it Yahweh or Yahweh, often translated Jehovah in our English translations. To use that name in vain means in emptiness. Vain means that there's no substance to it. It's just something we say. It's just an empty term. How dare we, when talking about Jehovah, use his name in any way that is characterized by emptiness. Would you not think that would be an insult to Him? That there's nothing in that name we're saying. But the principle here, I think, refers not only to God's name, but to His institutions. And I rank the church in there. And to His ordinances. And I rank the Word of God in that. I think respecting God means we're going to respect that which God instituted. And we're going to respect that which God said. How can you respect His name and pay no attention and not treat with reverence what He instituted and what He said? Now, here's where I think things get really tough. How do we apply all of that? It's one thing to say something like that, but you already knew that, didn't you? You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. You knew that, didn't you? But how do we apply that? When we leave here and go out and get some rest tonight, hopefully, and go to work tomorrow or to school or wherever we go, how do we put an application with this? I'm going to give you three things tonight. Number one, it would apply to any personal irreverence toward God. What about the profane use of God's name that you hear today? I think it is alarming. I know on television they bleep out words, but generally they do not bleep out the words that use God's name in emptiness. Those just get a pass. I think we hear them so much that we assume that they're okay. For instance, what about the infamous OMG? We put that on Facebook. We say it. Do we know what it means? Do we not know what OMG stands for? Do we not know that that is, oh my God? Do we not know that that is using the word in emptiness? That it is using God's word in vain? What about we say, oh God? Is that not using the name of God as a byword? Is that not using it in emptiness? Or what about for Christ's sake? Can we not just see in our mind that that is using His name, the name of His Son, in an empty, careful way? Or I will not say this next one, but you're smart enough to figure it out. What about when we pronounce a curse on somebody in the name of God? And I hear that one with regularity. Can we not see that all of those are examples of using God's name in emptiness? I think the name of God is holy and is not to be used offensively. Going back to the book of Job in the Old Testament in chapter 2, you remember Job lost everything but his wife. And I'll just not say anything about that. I'll just leave that right there. But he lost his children. He lost his crops, his herds, his flocks, his health. Did you ever have a boil? You know how painful that is? How would you like to be afflicted with boils from the top of your head to the very soles of your feet? Would that not be awful? So Mrs. Job said, just curse God and die. Now that's sage advice, isn't it? Just shake your fist in God's name and cuss Him, curse Him, and just die. That'd be better than going through what you're going through. You know what Job said? No, ma'am, thank you very much. I will not. That's not proper for me to do that. That's not how I ought to refer to God. I will not use that kind of language and that kind of attitude in speaking to God. So I'm saying, what about just in our daily use of our mouths? And it is so done so customarily and so carelessly that we don't even think about anything about it. And I'm saying we need to. I'm saying we need to make sure that we do not apply any personal irreverence toward God by the way that we use His name. Number two, what about a false oath or a frivolous oath made in God's name? Now, by the way, I'm going to run something by you that you may not even have thought of. I believe that may be the primary thrust of the commandment. And I say that based upon Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 12. Can I read that to you, or you can follow it along? That's Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 12. You shall not swear by my name falsely, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. What was forbidden in Leviticus? Taking an oath in the name of God. You want an example? What about, I swear to God this is the truth? Now, have you heard people say that? How careless is that? That we're taking some frivolous oath in the name of God, as if I don't do that, somehow it's not true. It's like I'm not obligated to tell the truth unless I take the oath in the name of God, or unless I say with my hand on the Bible or on my mother's grave. We have to somehow shore up our words. I think that's contrary to what God wants. As a matter of fact, in Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and verse 4, it says, when you make an oath or a vow to God, do not delay to pay it. If you make a vow, what's he say? Keep it. Pay it. You don't have to swear with your hand on the Bible, on your mother's grave, or in God's name. Jesus said, let your yeas be yea and your nays nay. Your yes is yes and your no is no. That's enough. If I say, this is what it is, this is what I say, then if I am a follower of Jesus, that's what I say and that's what I believe and that is what is true as far as I'm concerned. So let's make sure that we do not involve some false oath in God's name, because I believe that's using His name carelessly in emptiness. Now, one thing it does not violate, or that does not violate it, is a judicial oath. You know how I know that? You go to Matthew chapter 26, and I want to pick up the reading at verse 63. This is a long chapter, 75 verses. So I'm just going to read a couple of them, beginning at 63. But Jesus kept silent, and the high priest answered and said to him, I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus said, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. We're not supposed to take judicial, we're not supposed to take oaths, and I refuse to answer. Is that what he said? Next verse. Jesus said to him, it is as you said. Which is another way of saying, yes, I am who I said I am. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, the high priest didn't like that a little bit. But Jesus did not lecture him on taking oaths. He took one. Jesus took an oath. It was a judicial oath. And so if you go to court and they come up and say, put your left hand on the Bible and and raise your hand. And I know that sometimes we get all bent out of shape about stuff that's not worth getting all bent out of shape over. Have you noticed that? And so I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And so now you are allowed to say, I affirm that what I'm going to say is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Like, let me think. What's the difference between I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and I affirm that what I'm about to say is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? That's a difference between 6 and a half a dozen. There is no difference. It's just a silly way to get around something to make us feel better. Judicial oaths are not forbidden. It's that careless oath where we feel like we have to shore up something we've said by swearing by something that is true. Number 3, I think it involves hypocrisy. Now you have to think about this one for a minute. When we become Christians, what is the question that we're asked? We are authorized to ask people one question. I was told by an eldership on one occasion that you have to ask them about their marital situation. And I said, and that's found where? And they said, well, there's no verse that says that, but we just believe you really need to do that. I said, as far as I know, there's only one question I can biblically ask them. Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? That's what the Ethiopian was asked by Philip. Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? I do. When we become Christians, what do we affirm? That we believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. That we are committed to Him. That we now have a special relationship with Him that we did not have before. What if we play act? What if we're hypocrites about the whole deal? What's that say about the statement that we made on the front bench before the audience when we said, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Is that not using that name that we took, that we affirmed we believed in, that we would wear? Christians is wearing the name of Christ. When we act like hypocrites and play games, is that not using that name carelessly in an empty, non-meaning way? I would shake my head this way, I think. I think that's exactly what it means. And if you want to hear Jesus' most scathing rebukes, it was at religious hypocrites who played the game. As long as somebody was trying, they could be an absolute mess. And Jesus was as long-suffering and patient and kind as you can imagine. But when he got to the self-righteous scribes and Pharisees, he lowered the boom. All you have to do is read Matthew 23. And the favorite term was scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. Now that's not 3 classes of people. That's scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. That's what you are. Jesus called it like it was. The one thing that the Lord just does not tolerate is our play acting with Christianity. Now, we all mess up. We're all human beings. We all make mistakes. We all say, I'm never going to do that, and then we do it. Or we say, I'm going to start doing that, and maybe we don't. God understands that. The Lord is patient with that. What He's not patient with is people who play the game as if Christianity is a game to be played. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. That refers to how we use our tongues. That refers to oaths that we take. That refers to being hypocritical in our service. God's name is special. You remember how the prayer of example began in Matthew 6? We call it the Lord's Prayer. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. What's that name? What's that word hallowed mean? Holy. To be respected. And not only is God's name to be hallowed, but the things of God are to be hallowed. And so let's confess the name of the Lord in word and deed. Let's use the name of deity in praise as we sing songs like we did just a little while ago that Chris led us. And let us speak to him, of him to others, using his name with the greatest respect. And that means if somebody just has a language that is offensive to us, it's perfectly all right to walk away. You don't have to stand there and allow that to go on. And if you're really tough and really strong, you may just want to say, I'm sorry, I don't appreciate that kind of language. You're speaking about the God whose I am and the Jesus whom I serve.